Hello and welcome back to this demo for the Elusive Crusade. This video will be going over a couple new UK import first pressings that I was able to finally add to my collection. These are all titles that I've had on my Discogs wishlist for ages, and as I've talked about in some of my vinyl and record collecting videos, I do try to follow the country of origin rule. So obviously if it's a British band or British recording, I try to find an original UK first pressing. And of course, that means, hunting on eBay and looking for copies that are somehow in the US. I don't have to worry about shipping overseas and try to keep costs down. And that's already hard enough. And then, of course, the occasional UK first pressing you might find in a record shop. Even that is like it's a literal needle in a haystack. So I always do a definite celebration or happy dance or, some sort of crazy thing when I do manage to find one original UK first pressing or British pressing that I've been after for ages, or German pressing, or whatever it is I'm going after. But there are some particular bands and artists that I try exclusively to find British first pressings for, and all of these albums are on those lists. They are all bands or artists that I've been specifically for some years now trying to get the main discography in British first pressings, and it has gotten exceedingly difficult to do this, not only on a budget, but also because of the vinyl resurgence. So I will admit to having some saved eBay searches set up, so whenever some of these pop up, and lo and behold, this was one of those. Actually, all of these were from saved eBay searches, so I will admit to having those and occasionally scrolling through my way too many, admittedly, saved eBay searches and trying to, just see if anything's popped up. This first one is one I never thought I was going to find, simply because of the iconic status of the album and the cover, and also trying to get any Bowie albums now, any original pressings, whether it's US or UK. After his death, the cost of any Bowie-related material just went through the roof, even though there have been the reissue campaigns, which I don't really recommend the reissue vinyl because they're all remixed and remastered audio anyway. But trying to get the early albums in particular in original first UK pressings is exceedingly difficult. This one never pops up, and when it does, it is usually very expensive. This one was not, because the cover's not in the greatest shape. It does have a taped edge, but it's honestly not bad. It's much more impressive than what I thought it was going to be, so I'm glad I rolled the dice on it. But I managed to finally pick up an original UK pressing of Aladdin Sane, Bowie's iconic follow-up to Ziggy Stardust, with the gatefold cover. Again, the edge is unfortunately taped, but again, it's not very obtrusive. There is some browning and some dirt marks on the jacket. Pretty much every copy I've seen of this from this era, an original US pressing especially, is pretty much shot. So to have the gatefold on an original UK pressing still in nice shape, and the jacket isn't obscured, it's not hit with heavy ring wear, this was a really nice find. Again, the seller described it pretty well, but I was kind of iffy. I was like, I don't know how well the jacket's going to be. But of course, I was primarily interested in the condition of the vinyl. I can live with a pressing like this for a cheap price if the cover's not the greatest. And again, this was far better than I thought it was going to be. So that was a very nice surprise. But what was also very neat is it did have the original inner. So here's the original thicker cardstock inner with the lyric sheet, which you don't always find in these copies. And then here is the original RCA Orange Victor label. It's very easy to tell the UK Bowie albums from the US ones from this era, because all the US ones will be on the Dynaflex thin floppy vinyl and have the Dynaflex logo on them. And I very often see people label their eBay listings as UK pressings, but then you look at it as very clearly a Dynaflex US copy. So that's the easiest way to differentiate between US and UK pressings. The vinyl is actually in very exceptional shape. Like it does have some hairline scratches and things, but it is held up really well. It is the original cutting. Sonically, it is a real knockout. I've never gotten to hear a vintage pressing of Aladdin Sane before. Every time I've found a US copy, even the Dynaflex ones, they're beat to crap and overpriced, so I usually pass on them. And so I've always heard there's a bit of discussion. Some people like the original US, some like the original UK, and some prefer a German copy. So I would like to someday try out a German version of this to see how it stacks up against this particular version, the UK original. But I have to say, this is the best sounding Aladdin Sane I've heard personally. I've heard it on CD, I've heard some of the remasters. It's one of my favorite albums, but this has a particular punch to it, like the other UK Bowie albums of this era. So I'm really happy I was finally able to get the UK first pressing. And then also, this was a real surprise. Most of the time, this is the thing that is missing from all copies of for all original copies of the album, but this still retains the original fan club insert. So it's got Bowie's I Love You there, and then it's got the unfilled out join the fan club card there. So if you find this insert, it's usually been filled out and this part has been ripped off. So I've never actually found any copy of Aladdin Sane, any of the US ones, that is, with the insert in any form. So it was really amazing to find the insert still intact, not filled out, not detached, not cut off. So all in all, I'm very glad I rolled the dice on this one. And again, sometimes you get lucky with inexpensive copies like this. The cover may not be in the greatest shape, but it can still be very manageable. This is still a very frameable cover. And again, it was complete even with the fan club insert. So this was just a beautiful eBay find. Now, this next one I can't believe I finally have. This one is actually a bit deceptive because I bought a number of years ago what I thought was the original British first pressing, and it wasn't until after I played it once through I actually realized it was a slightly later second cutting that also had the same cover, the same main catalog number, but the only difference was the matrix info was a little bit different from the true first pressing, and it has an extra LC catalog number on the CBS Sunburst label. So that set me on a hunt to try and find the true original first pressing. And it's taken me until now to actually find it. And I'm still amazed I got it and got it for cheap. And it's immaculate like my second cutting copy, which now I can actually put these head to head. But I was finally able to get a copy of the Clash's Immortal self-titled debut album on the original true first UK British pressing with the original green UK cover and the original super important UK track listing that got torn apart and redone for the eventual later blue cover US and Canada release. So this is the true first pressing, and I will show you on the label here. Again, it's on the CBS Sunburst label. That's how you tell the early pressings from the later ones, which would be on the red CBS label on UK copies. But if you look here, you'll notice there's the one catalog number, and then over on the other side, on the second cutting that I've had for a couple years now, there's an LC catalog number. That's how you tell the two apart very easily. So to get the true first pressing like this one, you have to make sure that the Sunburst label here does not have a secondary catalog number on it. And in terms of sound, there is a distinct improvement on this first pressing over the second cutting. I don't know why there's a second cutting or why it sounds not quite as good. It still sounds great, don't get me wrong. It's been my go-to version for years. But again, I'm just so happy I was finally able to get the true first pressing and really be able to enjoy this album the way I've always felt it could be at home. And of course, this is how you want to hear this record. No other version comes anywhere close to this. This album is one I have tried to find for years and years and years, and actually completes a discography I've been working on all that time. This is a band that you do have to track down specific pressings. They did have a marked uptick in sound quality for their third, fourth, and fifth albums. And fortunately, their fourth and fifth albums are reference grade, and you can just get the US pressings and be good. But their first three albums really do require tracking down the original UK pressings. There is a significant difference over every other version I've come across, particularly the US pressings. Unfortunately, their first two albums don't have the greatest fidelity in the world, but the UK pressings make a world of difference. But for some reason, their second album is absurdly hard to find here in the US on the original UK first pressing. And that is the Police's second album, Regatta de Blanc. This is the original UK first pressing. It has the traditional UK flimsier, thin cardstock cover, which is why it's flopping around in my hands here. This is in really nice shape, and you don't want to know how many years I've tried to find one of these that doesn't cost an arm and a leg. Regatta also has several different original versions. Like their first album, Atlantis D'Amore, there's many different print runs and editions. Regatta also had a 10-inch version. It was pressed on 10-inch vinyl. I believe it was two 10-inch discs with the contents of the album spread across four sides. You might think that has an uptick in audio fidelity, but it actually doesn't. It's supposed to be a noisier pressing and not as well mastered. I've almost gotten it before, but I've read a number of reviews from people who owned it that said it wasn't as good as even the standard US pressing. And with my experience with Atlantis D'Amore on the original UK pressing and then the UK pressing of Zenyatta Mondada, I've tried to just wait to get a UK Regatta, but I don't know why. This thing is really elusive. If you're trying to complete a Police collection and you're trying to get all the best pressings in the world for each individual album, this is going to be the hardest one to get. Again, I don't know why. It has never popped up, and this was just one that finally popped up on eBay. I paid a little bit more than I normally would for an LP simply because I was tired of looking for it. Then the album itself is just on the traditional A&M label. This has mastering from Strawberry Studios, and the vinyl itself is immaculate, so it was well worth the wait. I do think this is the best sounding Regatta I've experienced. I have owned a US version before. It didn't sound very good, but it wasn't in the greatest condition in the world. And again, the 10-inch version is not supposed to be the greatest quality in the world, but it would be interesting to do a shootout between this original UK and some other versions at some point. But for the most part, just as my own findings and my own particular rule of thumb, with the Police, you do need to find UK pressings for the first three albums. Zenyatta Mondada is a beautiful sounding release. I don't know why, but after the first two albums, their recording fidelity just went into the stratosphere. So their final three albums are some of the best three of the best sounding records ever made, without question. And Ghost in the Machine and Synchronicity are additional levels of just audiophile heaven. They've been reference recordings since the day they were released. And on those two, the US pressings are, some of the best vinyl you can possibly buy. I do think the UK version of Ghost in the Machine, the mastering is the same. The vinyl is a little bit quieter, so if you went for a UK Ghost in the Machine, it'll cost you a little bit more, but you might get a little bit more performance. I do have both the US and the UK, and I can say the UK does have some quieter vinyl, so it is a little bit better than the US one. But the US one is very common and already sounds beyond excellent. But Synchronicity is, one of the... If Ghost in the Machine is like one of the top 10 or 20 great vinyl masterings, then Synchronicity's top 10, no question. I'm just so happy I finally finished the main Police discography I was trying to do. I was just trying to get the original UK pressings for the first three albums, the clean US originals for the last two, and maybe a UK Ghost in the Machine. I was able to do that for everything, and then I just could never find the UK Regatta de Blanc. So happy I've finally been able to do that. And then lastly, what would any self-respecting Who nerd be without multiple editions and different masterings of the same album, if not 5, 10, 20 different copies of the same Who record? Because as any audiophile or Who fan knows or should be aware of, The Who is just about the most diverse discography in terms of different masterings and having to obtain multiple different editions and singles worldwide to get every different mix and version of not just albums but individual songs. It is almost impossible to have a 100% complete Who collection with every variation and all in the best masterings. You will have to have, at the very least, a mixture of a massive amount of vinyl, a massive amount of CDs, and high-res releases, and many other different things. So it's, of course, no secret that I have multiple copies of Who albums, and I am trying still to complete the main discography on UK British original first pressings. I do have a good majority of them, which is amazing. I'm still amazed I've found as many as I have. But one I've been trying to get for a while and doesn't pop up all the time is the very original UK pressing of Odds and Sods, which is their B-Sides and Rarities compilation from '74. It was put together and compiled by John Entwistle and has particular mixes that were later replaced or changed on the remastered CD version that was also expanded. So that's another version of the same record. This has the iconic die-cut cover that was later replaced on reprints where they just printed it flat. So, of course, it's actually got holes cut in the jacket to match the torn apart and taped together photos of the cover. And then there's a nice printed photo inside that forms the back when, behind the images when you take everything out. Then the rear, it's of course the traditional thin, flimsy style UK cardstock jacket. The back has the original printed on Braille message, so there's actually Braille on here. I don't know how visible that is, but this is only going to be on the very first pressings. I think this made it over to the original US pressing, which I have, but I don't have next to me because, of course, I was too stupid to pull that out at the same time. But this is another way you tell apart the first pressings from the later editions. Of course, we have the lyric sheet and insert, which is really important because it actually has some Pete Townsend liner notes here on the side about each song and why it was never included on an album or why it was put back in the vault. But most copies are missing this by now, so it's great to have a fully complete, nice, minty copy, finally. I've almost gotten this before, but I've been outbid on it many different times, or I've thought I've found one, but it was a later pressing, or it didn't have the original cover, or the cover was shot, or the vinyl wasn't in very good shape, or it was somebody mislabeling a U.S. copy. And honestly, this album has always sounded good since it is a patchwork of material from different eras and recorded at various different intervals in the band's career. I owned the late '80s MCA vinyl version first, which sounded pretty okay. Then eventually I got the an earlier U.S. pressing. Then I got a first U.S. pressing, and now I finally have the original UK track label pressing. And for all you Matrix nerds out there, this is the A2B1 Matrix. There are later cuttings of this, and of course, different reissues. And with anything Who related, there are always substantial differences that can be had. Again, this is a better record than people give it credit for. It often goes unnoticed because it's not technically a studio album, but I think it should be considered as such. As it is one of the all-time great rarities and B-sides albums. It has so many songs that should have been put out on albums. It has some of the band's best songs, and honestly, it's literally worth the price of admission for the version of Pure and Easy that's on here, the studio version of the song that was famously dropped from Lifehouse. It's got such fire behind it. It's one of the best songs Pete Townsend ever wrote, and from the greatest album of all time that was never made, which was going to be Lifehouse. But it's worth the cost of admission alone just for the studio version of Pure and Easy. Plus you get so many songs that never saw the light of day otherwise or were B-sides, and they did have particular mixes on here that again were later changed on that remastered CD. So you kind of have to have both a version of the original and a version of the expanded remastered CD version. But it is one of the great rarities and B-sides albums. So this moves me one step closer to UK Who first pressing completion. Still have a number more to go. The two most difficult are really Quadrophenia, for one. That's always very difficult to get a true first pressing complete in good shape. It's definitely going to always cost you quite a bit. But the most difficult would be a true first pressing of the band's first album, My Generation, which was actually released on the Brunswick label. Clean, decent copies of that regularly sell for well over $500 or more. Trying to get a clean version of that for under $500 is pretty much impossible. It is a very rare first pressing to try and track down, especially clean. And I don't even know what one in mint shape would cost, but definitely much more than I can afford. I think the version of that I need to try and find is the 1980 Virgin label reissue, which was a mono reissue, I believe cut by George Peckham. That now goes for quite a bit, but I would like to try and find that, to at least have a vinyl version of the original mono mix. The version I have now, I have the original US stereo mix, which it's a slightly different album because it's the Who Sings My Generation. It's got a different cover, but the stereo mix on there, it's a fake stereo mix, but it is a part of the album's history. And with the Who, I try to collect every variation, and even original US pressings of their first two albums are very uncommon, especially clean. So I feel pretty good about having that, but I would like to have a version of the original UK album in mono on vinyl, and not one of the remastered reissues, because that's a whole different thing. But anyway, those are the UK first pressings that I've picked up for my record collection. I will be continuing in my series of going through letter by letter through the alphabet as I catalog in video form my record collection. I'm a little behind on that. I've been meaning to get back to that. So this is a little teaser of things to come, I guess. These are just some really beautiful titles that I've gotten recently, all of which have been on my wish list for years and years. So all of these I never thought I would find at decent prices. So these are all like things I thought unobtainable, or things I thought I would just have on my Discogs wish list forever. So again, just beautiful titles, and proof that you still can find great vinyl, great original pressings. It doesn't have to break the bank. As long as you know what you're looking for, and you occasionally take a risk or two, and you're also very patient waiting these things out, there is still great inexpensive vinyl to be had, even British original first pressings. I did not go over $30 for any of these, which is crazy considering what they typically go for. And all of these are in great shape. Even the Aladdin Sane copy with the sort of beat up cover, it's still in really nice shape in terms of the vinyl. And again, the cover was better than I thought it was going to be. So again, do stay tuned for my continuing vinyl collection series. I know I'm a bit behind on it, but I am going through letter by letter, and I guess I'll have these mixed in and just go over real quick when I get to those later spots in the alphabet. But I just wanted to put this together as I'm trying to at least keep cataloging anytime I get some new records in, which I haven't been buying as much because, to be honest, the vinyl revival has just driven costs up so much that it's not affordable. It's not as much fun to try and collect records because there's so many more people trying to buy the same things. It's harder to get things, and it's so much more expensive. But I hope this is proof that you can still find beautiful gems you've had on your Discogs wish list for years. It's still doable. It just takes patience and a lot of scrutinizing eBay listings, and definitely make saved searches if you want to. So as always, thanks ever so much for watching, and keep record hunting.